What's going on, my beautiful people? Fernando David here, and in this video we're going to be discussing Airbnb, VRBO, or multi-channel. Which strategy is going to be best to have a higher occupancy rate and average daily rate? But before we begin, let me show you this.
I love it. That is deer that has come out here this morning. Look at all the deer.
So, which strategy is best for you? The answer to that question is going to depend on what market you're in. I've said this before, you need to be a master of your market. You need to be the best source of information versus trying to get information out of the internet. You can use the internet to study your market, but you should actively be looking and learning what the trends are, what channels are best for you, etc. Now, what I'm going to be using is some data that I retrieved out of AirDNA and PriceLab, which are two dynamic pricing companies. If you're not familiar, or most of you are probably familiar with Airbnb's dynamic pricing, I highly recommend that you do not use Airbnb's dynamic pricing because it's my experience that pricing strategy is going to be skewed towards Airbnb and not towards you. So I highly recommend you avoid using that dynamic pricing. But dynamic pricing is important, especially if you want to maximize your average daily rate. So I highly recommend you look at either PriceLab, AirDNA, or any one that you researched. And I'm going to say that again, any platform that you researched and that you found to work best in your market. I can tell you that in my market, we use AirDNA and PriceLab to determine what the pricing is going to be for our property, and it has paid off in higher revenue. So let's go ahead and let's begin. Which strategy is going to work best for you? What I want to be discussing is really not for the beginner. If you are a beginner, meaning if you're a brand new host, I highly recommend that you do not follow a multi-channel strategy, that you pick one platform and master that platform before you decide to either add a second channel or use a multi-channel strategy. And again, if you want to learn more about why that is, just check out some of my other videos because I've done plenty of videos regarding pricing and multi-channel strategies. But this video is going to discuss the data that we retrieved from that multi-channel approach. And I'm going to preface it by saying that this was conducted by AirDNA. I'm using information that AirDNA provided. So just keep that in mind. So what AirDNA did was they took 7 cities, and for a year, they looked to see which platform was best in each one of these cities. And again, the conclusion, I'm going to give you the conclusion is that every city is going to be different. So you really need to understand your specific market. But I found this to be kind of interesting because one of the strategies that I thought worked across the board, it did not based on Airbnb's data. So the 7 cities that AirDNA used to use in this study was Denver, Guttenberg, Honolulu, Miami Beach, Myrtle Beach, New Orleans, and Phoenix. Interesting enough, those cities are the cities that are in the highest demand as it relates to short-term rental. So let's look to see first what the occupancy rate is. I am a big proponent that occupancy rate is probably one of the most important things that you need to understand, or one of the biggest important metrics to determine the success of your Airbnb. So in Denver, for example, they looked at Airbnb, HomeAway, which is also VRBO, and a multi-channel strategy. And what they found out was that in Denver, using Airbnb alone actually outperform multi-channels and HomeAway as it relates to occupancy rate. I want to make sure and make it clear that we're currently only talking about occupancy rate. Using that data, I highly recommend that you should be marketing and working on Airbnb. Okay. The next one, Guttenberg. This one was a little interesting to me because I thought Airbnb was going to dominate Guttenberg, but it did not. It was VRBO that did better and outperformed Airbnb, but using a multi-channel strategy, it was equal to or slightly better. Next, Honolulu. The Honolulu was a clear winner. Multi-channel strategy gave you a much higher occupancy rate. And just to give you numbers in terms of what they found, let's go back to Denver. Denver's average occupancy rate in Denver is about 74%. With HomeAway, it was below or 59% for Airbnb, and multi-channel, it was 70%. So there is a 4% difference there. Guttenberg, there is a 1.5% difference between multi-channel and HomeAway. Honolulu, this is where there was a big difference, right? Honolulu multi-channels had a 75% occupancy rate versus the next two, which were fairly close. Airbnb and HomeAway were very close to each other, but they were only at 65%. So that was pretty clear cut that you should be using a multi-channel approach if you are in the Honolulu market. Next, Miami Beach also saw the same difference. And again, Miami Beach, you should be using a multi-channel approach. Miami Beach also had a very high occupancy rate, and that I knew because that's my market. And they're also up in the 75 percentile. Myrtle Beach. Now, Myrtle Beach was interesting because HomeAway beat out both the multi-channel approach or the Airbnb single-channel approach. And it was substantial. There was a 5% difference between using solely VRBO or HomeAway versus the other two strategies. Next was New Orleans. Multi-channel beat out, but it was very minute between Airbnb and multi-channel. And then the last one was Phoenix. And Phoenix was, again, multi-channel performed better, but it was small. You're looking at a 2 to 3% difference between those two channels. So next thing we're going to look at is the average daily rate. Now here we saw some major differences in all the channels. So for example, Denver multi-channel approach gave you a higher average daily rate, which I found kind of interesting. Guttenberg gave you, if you only advertised at Airbnb, it gave you a higher average daily rate, but it wasn't a big gap compared to multi-channel, but it was a huge gap compared to HomeAway. Next, Miami Beach. No question, Miami Beach, and I'll show you the chart so you can, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this, but if you look at Miami Beach, which is this graph right here, it was substantial. It was more $80 per night difference in daily rate if you use a multi-channel versus single channel. Myrtle Beach, multi-channel one again. New Orleans, multi-channel one again, and Phoenix. So the multi-channel approach as it relates to average daily rate does give you a bigger advantage. And again, depending on your market, but there is an advantage to you use multi-channel. Now, the question is, why is that? Why is using multi-channel the way to go for most people? Now, I think those numbers are going to be skewed for the following reasons. Most people that are using multi-channel are experienced hosts or are professional management companies like ours. It is very difficult for a small mom and pop operator to use multi-channel because it's a lot of work and you need to buy expensive software to help you manage that. So keep that into account because I do think that those numbers are skewed for that reason. Doesn't change the fact that if you master this business, using multi-channel is going to be better. So I'm really hoping that you understand what I tried to express in this video. And there's 2 points. In conclusion, we're going to close with this. First and foremost, you need to understand the channel and master the channel that you are listing your properties on. And then number 2, if you want to make this a business, if you want to grow both in terms of revenue and in terms of overall business, you have to establish a multi-channel approach. So if you can't do that on your own, hire someone. If this is something that you want to do and have the ability to do what I do and travel and stay and visit countries, cities, stay in other Airbnbs, then hire a professional company or get a very strong team behind you, because that's going to give you the freedom that you're going to need to do the stuff that I do. Hope this helps. If it did, please do us a big favor. Hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, subscribe to the channel and share this information. And lastly, follow us on Instagram. The handle's listed below. Love you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.